with speakers, President of National Parents Union, Keri Rodrigues, and founder and executive director of Pave, Parents Amplifying Voices in Education, Maya Martin Cadogan.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Romy, the director of the education program at the Walton Family Foundation, and soon to be first-time mom. On behalf of the foundation, I am so excited that we are sponsoring this conversation, this convening, and this celebration of women. I'm thrilled to be up here with two multi-hyphenate mamas leading the charge for educational justice in this country. And Keri, Maya, I'd love to just start with introductions, have each of you tell your story quickly, because I want to get into the challenges and the opportunities. Keri, let's start with you.
So my name is Keri Rodrigues, and I'm Matthew, Miles, and David's mom. I'm also the president of the National Parents Union, which is a beautiful collection of pockets of parent power, 1,600 of them, in all 50 states, Washington, D.C., and Puerto Rico. And all of these pockets of parent power are actually led mostly by women who have decided that they wanted to create change in educational outcomes for their kids. And a lot of them are moms just like me. Moms who have had direct lived experience. I'm sitting here today as, a former student who was expelled from public school. I have a GED from Boston Public Schools and decided that when I became a mom, that my kids were not going to go through the same cycle that I went through. But unfortunately, when my youngest son was in kindergarten and happens to have a diagnosis of autism and ADHD, he was suspended 36 times in kindergarten. And so in front of me, I said, oh my gosh, I can't believe that this is going to be another cycle of this in my family. So I said enough is enough and started organizing, because that's what I do. When I get mad, I organize. Have been doing it since I was about 12 years old, which probably is why I got expelled from school. Story for another day. But, I'm not that unique. I'm not unique in this moment right now, because we have this beautiful history of women who have organized for educational justice and economic justice in their neighborhoods, in their cities, and in their states forever. And so it's my blessing to be so connected with all of these women who are leading these extraordinary movements for justice in their communities, so that we can fight for a better future for our kids.
It's hard to follow Keri, but my name is Maya Martin Cadogan. I'm the founder and executive director of Pave, which in the wonderful world of DC acronyms stands for Parents Amplifying Voices in Education. And I am a sixth-generation Washingtonian. Yes, we do exist. Raising a seventh-generation Washingtonian in the district. And part of the reason that I started doing this work is because I had a single mom who fought for myself and my brother to get the best education that we could get. And that looked different for both of us. But oftentimes I saw her fighting alone inside of our schools, and I wanted to figure out, if my mom was doing that, how could we create an army of mamas, papas, grandmamas, grandpapas, aunties, uncles who could fight for all of our kids? And so that's what we do today. Our parents are here today, and they're policy experts. They are advocates for not just their child, but every child in the District of Columbia, and they are fierce organizers in their communities. And what that's meant is that our babies have been centered in the policymaking decisions that we're doing here in the district. That means that our out-of-school time programs, we've quadrupled funding for that. It means that our per-pupil funding has risen faster than any other state in the nation. It means that our school-based mental health program was fully funded before we entered the pandemic. And so all of our schools, both public charter and DCPS, had at least one mental health professional budgeted for them. It means that parents are working on safe passage to school and making sure that kids can get to and from school safely. It means that we've created new schools, both in DCPS. We have Bard Early College High School, which is the first of its kind selective high school east of the Anacostia River, which if you know DC, you know is a dividing line. And so now kids are traveling backwards to go to school, because most kids travel from Ward 8 and Ward 7 to go across the river, which is amazing. We have a school on Joint Base Anacostia Bowling that is the first charter school that parents selected, and the authorizer approved the school that they identified, and that's all because of parents. When you actually put parents at the center, the first thing that parents worry about are their kids. I'm a mom myself, and so I know that every day I wake up thinking about how is Xander doing and how am I making sure that he has the exact kind of education that he needs, and he's only 17 months old. But it worries me every single day, and that's what our parents at Pave do, and when you put us at the center, if you take care of kids, you're going to take care of moms, and that's why we're here today.
Thank you both. I want to come back to solutions and what's working. But first, I want to build a common understanding of the challenge. And we've talked a lot about the intersectionality of the challenge today. As some of you may know, the pandemic erased 2 decades of progress in literacy and math in this country. And it affected students and learners of all types. Keri, let's start with you, but help us understand what is the challenge in K-12 education that moms advocating for change are up against right now?
Yeah, I think I have to start by saying, like, this is something that is a top concern for moms. I get emails at 3 o'clock in the morning because mamas are up and they're worried and they're concerned about what is happening with their kids, because education is our hope for the future. You know, this is what we are hoping is going to set our children up for success and accessing opportunity and getting the ability to experience economic mobility. And when you can see, and this was the great gift of the pandemic, you know, there were some gifts. You know, we had this great awakening of parents who actually saw what was happening in the nation's classrooms, you know, for good and for bad. And they were very invested. We were co-teaching, and in some places actually teaching our children for about 1.5 years. So we had a front row seat in terms of where they are, what they're doing, what the experience looks like. So when we take a look at the challenges that are ahead of us, I mean, we've got a lot of work to do. Only 4 out of 10 students in the United States right now are proficient in reading. 4 out of 10 in the United States. And it's even worse when we talk about math. And I have to be honest with you, like that's the best we do, 4 out of 10 in places like Massachusetts. In some cities, in some states, we're talking 2 out of 10. There is a fundamental literacy crisis happening in this country. The good news is we know what to do to fix it, but we got to get to work. And that is going to require all of us as the grown-ups to do big, difficult, hard things and change the system. And you know, one of the things that I find just so bizarre, you know, we talk about like all of these systems in this country that are so antiquated and need to be dismantled and reimagined. But when it comes to education, we have this addiction to a 190-year-old model of how we deliver education as being, you know, the end-all be-all. We have learned so much over the course of the last 190 years about just, you know, brain science, you know, early childhood and how our kids develop. But the system is just so slow to embrace a lot of what we've learned and these new techniques and technologies, and you know, just the fact that one size doesn't fit all for all of our kids. So it's really on all of us to do the big hard things of getting over adult feelings about I don't like to change, or this is the way we've always liked to do things. The fact of the matter is, you know, as our friend Emily Oster says, yeah, we've got to look at the data and make some decisions about how we change the system. And I don't know about you guys, but when I hear 4 out of 10 kids are proficient in reading, that's a crisis. And I'm here to tell you, the National Parents Union, we have done polling to actually quantify for a lot of our policymakers and our elected officials the fact that this is the issue that every parent in America wants us to work on. 86% of American families believe that this is a crisis, and a crisis that we need to make a priority in this country. So to me, that's the big challenge, and it's something that could be absolutely transformational for our kids, because when you take a look at the rates of literacy for our children and how they are directly correlated to the rates of literacy in incarcerated people, I mean, if that doesn't tell you that changing those rates and getting our kids to proficiency could have an absolutely transformational change and make everything different in this country, I don't know what to tell you. The data is really clear.
Maya, education is a local issue, a state issue, a federal issue. Tell us about the biggest obstacles you're up against in the work that you do locally in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I thought about even joining this panel, it's about moms leading the fight for educational equity. And I think the hard part is we all know our schools are not equitable. They are not equitably funded. We don't have equitable access to those schools depending on where you live and where you come from and what your background is. And some people are already exercising some version of choice, which we talked about a lot here today when I listened to the earlier panels. When you're talking about maternal health, when you're talking about childcare, paid family leave, it's all about giving women more choices and giving families more choices. And yet that's not really the way that we construct education in this country. What we think about is that the people who have money have choice, right? Which I feel privileged to be able to have even myself today. That's so different from the black mother that raised me, the black grandmothers that raised me, the black great-grandmothers that raised me, because I got to know all of those generations of my family. And I think the hard part is it shouldn't be based upon what your income is and your ability to move and buy a house that determines if you can find the right fit school for your child. We know as moms that even if we have multiple children in our household or in our family, they don't all need the same thing. They're all very different, right? What I needed as a kid was completely different than what my brother needed as a black boy in schools. And what that meant was that my mom was often trying to navigate a system, and even before the word school choice existed, she was traveling all around our city to make sure we got the right education. We didn't go to the same schools very often, and here she was, a single mother, half the time on the bus, trying to figure out the car that was not going to break down to get us to and from school every single day. And because of that, I had some of the best educational experiences in my life, but the burden that should have been placed on her should never have been placed there, right? It should have been that she should have known that if she knows her child, she knows how to open up the interests and her passions and give her the kind of curriculum and teaching and instruction that's just gonna make her find joy. And the same for my brother, and that's just not the reality. And so I think our biggest barrier is really that we talk about equity, but we don't live equity in terms of the way that we do education. And so much of the conversation today here has been about how do we do things more equitable in all parts of the system, but we really have to think about how we're doing that as a part of schools. Every single child needs something different. And we should make our goal that every single child gets a school, and each school, right, because that might look different in elementary than middle than high school, that they need in order to find their passions, figure out what their careers and their journey is going to be, and be able to excel at whatever their dreams are.
And Romy, if I can just say, the emotional toll that it takes on moms, parents in general, but really on moms, when they know their child is every day going into a classroom where they do not fit, where it's not a good choice, and finding out that it is such a struggle to be able to, I don't know, even change a class half the time, to get a different teacher when you know that there's just a personality conflict. Or the building itself, the school itself is just not serving your child. Your child is in the wrong box. And you don't have access to another option, you feel as if you're failing your child, and you're helpless. And the stress and the emotional toll that takes on, that we take on as mothers, that's really what brought me to this work, is knowing that, you know, as I sat at the end of an IEP table, I was helpless. I had all of these experts around me that made it very clear that, like, this was not the right fit for my son, but I didn't have any other option or alternative. And you know, that's what keeps moms up at night. That's what adds to our stress level, feeling that we're failing our kids, but being boxed into that only solution. We've got to have more solutions.
And we do have solutions, and I want to talk about that because there's a sense that the system is big and it's been challenged for decades, and we know there are so many bright spots out there, and not just bright spots, but sustainable policy and programmatic solutions. So I want to ask each of you to talk about what is working? What is working to help students tap into their purpose, to find the thing that motivates them to pursue their dream, to be part of our society in a constructive way? Maya, let's start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I'm just it just amazes me every day to watch our parents in action. Two of our moms that are here today, one has 5 boys that she's raising. I don't know how Catrice does it, y'all, because I have one and he's jumping off the walls, so I give her much praise. And Simone has 2 kids that she's raising, and it's just amazing to watch them because each of them have given, even this school year alone, over 75 hours of volunteer time to doing policy, advocacy, and organizing work. That means they're showing up at the council, they're doing meetings with elected officials and policymakers, they're building coalitions with other groups like teachers, school leaders, and community organizations. And so, what I see in terms of the solution is how do we put moms at the center, right? I think when you look in communities, what I always remember from my childhood growing up is that moms could bring everybody together, right? We can get everybody to do the work. We get you to come to the potluck, make sure that you submitted all the things that need to be done for Teacher Appreciation Week, and that we've gathered all the dollars, and that we've gotten the gifts out the door, and we're doing the fundraisers, and we're doing all the things, right? And that's not different for any mom, regardless of what her background is, because that's just how moms do it. Nobody has any idea how we do all of it, but we do. And so part of it is that when you put moms at the center, moms are great at building relationship with such a variety of people that you can build a coalition of folks that can really get stuff done. And what that's looked like in the district is that we know our kids hurt after COVID. COVID was a hard time for every single child in this country, especially given the shutdowns and the closures and the lack of ability to build relationships with other kids and adults inside of their buildings. And so we've tried to think about what are all the things that kids need to do recovery. And just recently we got data that showed our students were actually doing 2 months better than expected in math and 1 month better than expected in reading. That means our teachers and our schools are working so hard to make sure our kids have what they need, but that's because moms made sure that schools were resourced with everything that they need, right? The reason that we have higher per pupil funds in DC is because our moms fought for it. They not only fought for per pupil, they fought for funds for at-risk families, so families who are homeless or receiving benefits or on housing vouchers, putting more money when they go to a school to service them. We fought for making sure that students with disabilities had what they needed inside of classrooms. We fought for making sure that everybody had a counselor or a behavioral health specialists inside of schools. We made sure that everyone had a program after school or in the summer that serviced their needs and made sure that they could enjoy school and find connections in their learning. Moms made that possible. And when you actually put moms as the center, and I'm not talking about moms being a part of the community group, I am actually talking about moms being the policymakers themselves, because I would tell you, Catrice and Simone, those 2 women, they are policymakers. They write their own statements of belief about what they believe should happen in policy, and then they go and they get it done and bring everybody else along with them. And so I think if we could do that, we could really get to a place where we're actually creating the kind of schools that each one of our kids deserve.
And there are moms across this country that are doing that work. And we're joined today, again, some members from the National Parents Union as well, from Atlanta, from San Antonio, Texas, that are literally leading the fight in their your individual cities to make sure that this happens. We're doing it on a statewide level as well. In Massachusetts, we led an effort to transform our state's education funding formula so that it would be more equitable. And not just more equitable and more money, but making sure there was transparency and accountability around how that money was used. So that we made sure that that money that they were getting, those extra, per pupil expenditure dollars were spent on addressing the achievement gap so that we could track tangible outcomes for our kids. In Minnesota, we also led a fight where parents wrote legislation called the READ Act that guarantees that every child in Minnesota, 1.1 million kids impacted, would have the right to read proficiently by 3rd grade. And if not, it would trigger interventions. So we could actually have some tangible movement in terms of getting to those outcomes. But the thing that it did that was different, because it was focused on parents, and parents actually wrote this legislation, was that it created an actionable right, so that if they don't do it, we can hold them accountable in court. And here we are the week that we are commemorating Brown versus the Board of Education, 70 years ago. That was parent action. Parents showing up at court because we're not props, we're future plaintiffs that can hold the system accountable if it does not produce outcomes. So we are creating those conditions to make sure that not only the system changes, but if it doesn't change, we can hold them directly accountable.
One of the threads of the conversation today that I feel really inspired by is this idea of allyship across issue areas. I would love for each of you to share your reflections on the allies that we want to be working with in the Education Change Coalition. We're not always in rooms with women advocates more broadly, with mom advocates, and we feel really honored to be in this room. What would you say to the folks in this room about how they can get involved, and who do we need at our tables?
Well, one of the beautiful things that happened, like how do we actually pass a law? How do we change this? That sounds really big and really hard. It's like that old adage, like how do you eat this elephant? One bite at a time, right? And you got to bring some friends in too. So one of the beautiful things that we did around the READ Act was building this beautiful tapestry of all different intersectionalities, all different groups of moms. Because, you know, we kind of get up in our own little girl gangs, man. We've got our own, like, our own special interest groups. But what we did in Minnesota was so beautiful, because not only did you have low-income moms, not only did you have the brown mamas, the black mamas, you had dyslexia mamas. You had white mothers of privilege joining us. All different. It transcended race, class, any demographic, any geography across that state. Moms came together and said, you know what? Our children deserve to have the right to read proficiently by 3rd grade. And we're all going to use our collective power together to make this happen. And so when we're building coalitions, that's the great thing about moms. Like, I think we do this work a little bit differently, because I don't know about you guys, like, we put our egos to the side. This is about the babies. This is about outcomes. We don't care about the squabbles and the personality conflicts. I mean, we get into a little bit of that, like, let's be honest here. But when moms come to do work for our babies, a lot of that stuff get put aside. Like, we don't care who gets credit for it. We don't care whose name is on it. We are collectively trying to change the world for our children. And that is what happened in Minnesota. And I think that's possible everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the important things is that moms cross all boundaries, right? If we're talking about who the business people are, they're moms, or they're married to moms, or they have a mom. If we're talking about people who work in any industry in our cities and states, they're all moms or connected to moms. And I think a lot of times we think the mom role is like one role and it's separate and apart. And yet, as a mom myself, I'm a multitude of identities. And I think a lot of times when we think about Coalition at Pave, what we're thinking about is how are we just making sure that everybody can be a part of this work. So a lot of our moms at Pave are teachers, right, inside of classrooms. And so they're both delivering instruction to kids and they're delivering more instruction to their kids after school, right? We think about the business community and we're like, we can't have a healthy workforce if we are actually not thinking about what our education and pre-K through 12th grade system looks like. I think also speaking to the intersectionality, we think about what are the other issues. So a great example is that Pave, we worked actually a lot on childcare, and that was something that was very different than traditional K through 12 education. And the reason that we did that is because many of our moms had kids who were young and in childcare. And so we actually helped to make sure that money was passed in our budget to give stipends to childcare workers so they could get paid wages that meant that the childcare system didn't get disrupted during the pandemic, to get them bachelor's and master's degrees so that they could run centers and be teachers. And I've been able to benefit from that myself as a mom. The center my child goes to has benefited from that. And it's amazing to think that was a project we worked on 5 years ago and how it's paying off now. But we thought about it because what moms are dealing with are all the same issues that we're all dealing with inside of our cities and our states. And so a lot of times what I think about in terms of coalition is that coalition is just all of us, right? And when you imagine a room that moms build, it is a room that cuts across race, ethnicity, geographic boundaries, background, because moms are just going to pull everybody together, as Keri said, to just get it done for kids.
Thank you for calling out the importance of working across lines of difference. I also just want to give an extra shout out to teachers, who you mentioned, Maya. 77% of our K-12 teacher workforce is women, and many of those women are mothers, and they are part of the village raising our children. They need stability in the classroom, they need stability at home, so I just want to call them out as part of the coalition, folks we need to be supporting, and they need to be at the table co-creating with us. Let's talk a little bit about the call to action that you all want this room to hear, and everyone on the live stream. This is an urgent moment. It's also a moment of opportunity. As both of you noted, people woke up to the reality of the inequities in education, the long-standing achievement gap, the academic challenges, also the mental health challenges that are deep-seated in our schools. We talked a lot about that earlier this morning. What can moms do at the PTA level, at the school level, and how can they be part of this conversation about sustainable systemic change?
Yeah, I think we've got to organize literally at every single level. But I'm not here to just talk. I mean, I love a good panel, but I'm actually here to recruit all of you. I don't know, I'm going to say it one more time. 4 out of 10 kids in America are proficient in reading. This is a national crisis in our country, and it requires a federal response. So we are working as hard as we possibly can at the National Parents Union. All of these 1,600 groups, all of these mamas that are leading these individual movements, we need all of your help collectively, because it's great to pass these local laws, these state laws. We need a federal law that guarantees every child in America the right to read proficiently by 3rd grade, and we can get it done. I will tell you, we led a group of 200 of the top parent leaders in education to Washington, D.C. from 47 different states just 3 weeks ago. And we met with Democrats, we met with Republicans, and we demanded action. They met us literally when we were getting off the buses, because moms can demand that level of respect, and they know we mean business, because we are going to get this done. But we're going to need all of you to get this done. So please, if you're looking to get involved on the local level, we have local groups. You want to bring it up to your governor? Do you know your governor? Please contact your governor right now. If you want to join us in DC, we could use your help. But you can't stay stuck. We're not leaving this room saying like, oh gosh, this is a terrible problem. What can we do? We can do something. We're going to do something. And parents right now, as we speak, are in Washington, D.C., literally co-creating, drafting the legislation that we will hope will be out in September of 2024 that will make that a law in this country. This is something transformational we can get done, but we need your help. Who's going to help? Y'all going to help? All right.
Yeah, I mean, I echo everything Keri said, and I just think when I think about how we are doing this work, it is so important that we are all just standing up for each other, just as Keri talked about. I think there are probably in each of your cities or states moms that are already getting the fight started and who are showing up and trying to make change. And the question is just how do we find them, right? At Pave, we have a network of 6,000 parent leaders, but we've got 90,000 kids in DC schools, right? And so we know that's just the tip of the iceberg in terms of who needs to know about the work. And so I think the question is, how are you finding out in the places where you live? Because all of us are moms that send our kids to schools, right? Who are these folks that are doing this work, and how do you join in that fight? But when I say that, I mean to do that in a collective sense. What I love about the spirit with which Pave parent leaders come into this work is that it is not just about their child. They come to the work because they care about their child. But when they are doing the work, they care about every single baby in the District of Columbia. And we really believe in collective visioning. We believe in collective policy making. Like when we vote on our 2 top policy priorities every year at our annual Parent Policy Summit, a lot of times people don't get the issue that they voted on. That doesn't mean that that's not the issue, that they're not going to fight with everything they've got to make happen for the next year, because what they do is they listen to each other and figure out, maybe it's not my number 1 issue, but maybe it's many other people's number 1 issue. And so that means that's something that we need to change. And I think we've lost a lot of that in terms of the way that we used to do the work. I know I heard people mention earlier, Ella Baker. I'm a student of Marshall Gann's, who helped to lead Obama's field campaign. Like when we think about what organizing really is at its center, it is not about any one person's issue. It is actually about what is most important to all of us. And so I think the question is, how do you find the moms that are doing that work? How do you show up and listen? How do you show up and understand? How do you show up and then do that fight together with them? And then guess what? The reason people love Pave, all of our parents, is because they win. And they win for kids. And I just, that means so much to me that everybody in our city knows when the Pave parents are putting on their purple t-shirt and they're showing up, that purple wave means something. And it's great to be a part of that. And I think we forget that in these education conversations so often because we're so used to hearing about what's not working in education. But there are so many stories just like ours of moms that are doing the work and moms that are really winning for kids. And so I just say, go be a part of it. Trust me, it feels really good.
Reimagining K-12 education is about moms today, and it's about a future generation of girls, women, and mothers. Thank you both for the amazing work that you're leading, and thank you for having us here today.